Hi, guys. Hopefully, the second time on this is the charm. The first time I recorded it, it came out with a really funny glitch in the middle. So, hopefully, this time it's going to work. Um, you're going to laugh at this. I'm actually preaching in the prison occasionally in Spanish. My accent is horrible. So, they get to laugh at me. You can laugh at me too, of course, but they get to laugh at me a whole lot more because my Spanish is awful. This is the first sermon I preached for them in Spanish. You get to hear it in English. So let's go ahead and get started. The sermon is based on both texts again today, but I'm going to read the Exodus text so you didn't have to read the hard words. This is Exodus 1, 8 through chapter 2, verse 10. So hear the word of God. Now a new king came to power in Egypt who didn't know Joseph. He said to his people, the Israelite people are now larger in number and stronger than we are. Come on, let us be smart and deal with them. Otherwise, they will only grow in number. And if war breaks out, they will join our enemies, fight against us, and then escape from the land. As a result, the Egyptians put 4 men of forced work gangs over the Israelites to harass them with hard work. They had to build storage facilities named Pithom and Ramses for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they grew and spread. So much so that the Egyptians started to look at the Israelites with disgust and dread. So the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites. They made their lives miserable with hard labor, making mortar and bricks, doing field work, and by forcing them to do all kinds of other cruel work. The king of Egypt spoke to 2 Hebrew midwives named Shiphrah and Puah. When you are helping the Hebrew women give birth and you see the baby being born, if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl and you see being born, let her live. Now the 2 midwives respected God, so they didn't obey the Egyptian king's order. Instead, they let the baby boys live. So the king of Egypt called the 2 midwives and said to them, "Why are you doing this? Why are you letting the baby boys live?" The 2 midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because Hebrew women aren't like Egyptian women. They are much stronger and give birth before any midwives can get to them." So God treated the midwives well. And the people kept on multiplying and became very strong. And because the midwives respected God, God gave them households of their own. Then Pharaoh gave an order to all the people, "Throw every baby boy born to the Hebrews into the Nile River, but you can let all the girls live." Now a man from Levi's household married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw that the baby was healthy and beautiful, so she hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she took a reed basket and sealed it up with black tar. She put the child in the basket and set the basket among the reeds in the riverbank. The baby's older sister stood watch nearby to see what would happen to her. And Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, while her women servants walked along beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent one of her servants to bring it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child. The boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. She said, "This must be one of the Hebrews' children." Then the baby's sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter agreed. "Yes, do that." And so the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay you for your work." So the woman took the child and nursed it. After the child had grown up, she brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses because, she said, I pulled him out of the water. May God bless the reading and the hearing of this God's holy word. Amen. For 3,000 years or more, pilgrims have crested the hill and looked out over the valley toward their destination. For 3,000 years or more, people from distant lands have felt a sense of homecoming as they saw that sight, the sight they have waited their whole lives to see. Once the city was small and it had a squat square temple, which was the traditional Middle Eastern design, and it would have dominated the whole of the valley. Later on, after several invasions, the city was replaced over and over again, and this time when the temple was rebuilt, it was rebuilt in the Roman style, with columns and porticos, but this time the temple was missing the eagles of Roman Jupiter, and the statues of the other gods were not built into the temple. The city was bigger than it had been in those earlier days. Today, if you go to the city and you look out over that valley, the city fills the whole valley. Even the old city dump is filled in now with housing. But the eye is drawn automatically to the golden dome of a blue hexagonal mosque. As the more experienced pilgrims point out the other holy places in the city, some eyes are drawn just to the west of the mosque, to a wall of white stone. It's all that's left of that original, or actually second, temple. Herod's temple platform was built to accommodate a much larger temple than would have originally fit on that hill. And so he built a retaining wall, and that is all that's left of that temple. Others will seek out the cross-shaped crusaders' churches that dot the city, or the dome-shaped basilicas of Orthodox churches. Still others will find the old olive trees of Gethsemane and the much younger ones of the Garden of the Righteous that surround the Shoah Museum. And many of the people, Christians and Jews of many nations, will begin to sing a playlist that is 3,000 years old. They begin to sing the songs that begin in Psalm 113 and end with 129. They will sing songs that record the love of God for a people, and of a people for that God. Today, many of those people who meet these pilgrims, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, look at them as if they are crazy. They doubt the very existence of that God. If they accept that there might be a God, they are skeptical of divine intervention. The Psalms are just a relic of a time long past that have no meaning. But the Psalms include words like these. If the Lord had not been for us, let Israel now repeat, if the Lord hadn't been for us, when those people attacked us, they would have swallowed us up whole with their rage burning against us. And the people who hear those words, who have no faith in their hearts, don't understand at all how someone can say this. Because they seem like the bitterest of ironies. How can a people who survived the Shoah, the Holocaust, claim that God had been on their side? How can people who have come to walk the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrows, where a good and noble man once walked to his death, if he existed at all, they're not even sure of that, claim that God loved that man? Didn't this God abandon his people and his son? They don't understand us. Jesus asks Peter in the gospel text today, "Who do people say the human one is?" The apostles reply, "Some say he's John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." People don't know who Jesus is. And then he asks them, "What about you? Who do you say that I am?" And Peter answers for all of them, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus then warns the disciples that he is about to go to his death. And this confuses them. For too many people, everything about this interaction makes no sense. It didn't make sense to Peter. Peter promptly puts his foot in his mouth. Peter always is putting his foot in his mouth, but it doesn't make sense to us either sometimes. How can faithful Jews continue to worship the God of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Leah, and Rachel? How can we follow someone who died? Why should any of us do this? I can't speak for any Jew about their answers, but here at least are some of my answers to why I'm a Christian. For many, the only sure thing in their world is wealth, strength, power, and knowledge. For many, all you can do is obtain those things. God, if God exists at all, cares nothing about human beings. Therefore, human beings must spend their lives acquiring more money, more strength, more power, and more knowledge. Only then will we be truly safe. And they don't like it when the world or another person points out that there is someone wealthier, someone stronger, someone more powerful, or more knowledgeable. But even if they were the most wealthy person on the planet, or the strongest, or the most powerful, or the most knowledgeable person, these things are not a guarantee against natural disasters, disease, war, or economic collapse. Far too many people treat the world this way. Some of them are even Christian. They accept that God exists. They've placed God in a box, though, where there isn't enough space for God to turn around. God can't rule the world in a box. They've confined God to one sphere of life or another. It's okay, they say, for kids to believe in God. It will teach those kids morals. Or it's okay for people back then to believe in God, that he actually did whatever it is, separated the Red Sea, or fed 5,000 people, or fill in that blank with whatever you want right there. Those are just stories to prove something. This little God has almost no impact on their lives, at least not outside of the general sense of right and wrong. Others treat God like community chest and Monopoly. You remember playing Monopoly? You'd land on community chest, you'd pick up the card, and it would tell you either pay community chest something or community chest would pay you. That's also where you got the get out of jail free card. That's what God is for them. All of these gods are too small. And the people who follow them are trapped in views of the world that is too small. They are trapped by greed, idolatry, and ignorance. God's world is far too complicated. And it's only by approaching it with wonder can we understand our place in it. Walter Brueggemann points out that these attitudes are as old as the events recorded in the book of Exodus. He says it is the story of a pharaoh whose name we cannot remember, because once you've seen a pharaoh, pharaoh of course means the mighty house, the mighty ruler. You've seen them all. This nameless lord of Egypt strives to stop the music, but he can't. There is a different vision possible. It's in the view of that psalmist who, amid defeat, loss, and exile, slavery in a foreign land, who had the vision to dream of a God who would let him go free like a bird from the snare of the fowler. It's in the vision of Peter who opened his mouth and managed this time to keep his sandal out of it. To see in Jesus the Son of the living God. It's in the vision of those courageous midwives who took their hands and their lives to defy that unjust law, to spare the lives of baby boys damned to death and to lie about it to authority. Of them, Brueggemann says this: because of their singing in the Hebrew barrio, it became a place that was infested with the future, a place from which has arisen all the later daring dances of freedom, a dance of defiance, of gratitude, and of hope. It was these two women with the hard-to-say names, Shiphrah and Puah, who inspired slaves in another land to look north and to look south, to rivers far deeper and wider than the Jordan, which was crossed by those Israelites a generation later. Those slaves turned the mighty rivers of the Ohio and the Rio Grande into the Jordan of their dreams and songs. When they sang, "Go Down, Moses," or "Michael, row your boat ashore," or "I looked over Jordan and what did I see? But a band of angels coming after me," they were looking to the lights of the Ohio and the safety of the North, or they were looking across that wide and deep Rio Grande into Mexico toward freedom. It was the lights of Portsmouth and Cincinnati, or the lights of the first church they met with on the southern bank of the Rio Grande that welcomed them into freedom. It was the priests in Juarez and Nogales and Chihuahua who opened their doors, and the monasteries of monks and nuns and the common folk of the churches in those places who gave them freedom. It was the belief of women in churches along their routes to freedom that changing the world sometimes started with nothing more than stitching rags together to form a quilt with a message of safety or danger sewn into a pattern that told the runaway slave whether it was safe to stop or whether or not there were slave catchers in the neighborhood and they needed to run on across the invisible lines of a railroad that had no tracks. These women's names are mostly forgotten. But it was their wash that they hung out as a sign of welcome to those many said at the time were not even human. They cleared spaces in their root cellars and baked extra bread to feed a stranger, who just simply welcoming into their home could lead to imprisonment or death. To all who helped them. In truth, they became the band of angels coming after me in the songs that those running those lines sang. If we no longer believe that hanging out the wash can change the world, we need to hear again the words of Paul. So then, he says, my friends, because of God's great mercy to us, I appeal to you. Offer yourselves as a living sacrifice to God, dedicated to his service and pleasing to him. This is the true worship that you should offer. Do not conform yourselves to the standards of this world, but let God transform yourself inwardly by a complete change of your mind. Then you will be able to know the will of God, what is good and what is pleasing to him, and what is perfect. God's world runs counter to our expectations. And as long as we live in a world dominated by the belief in wealth, power, strength, and knowledge, we cannot see it. We remain prone to fits of despair and doubt. We cannot envision the change we need or become it. God remains distant until we make that first leap of faith. It may well be a blind leap, incomprehensible to all who have not taken it. It is a belief in the power of God to change our lives, to change our world, that gives all the heroes of our faith, both named and unnamed, the courage to shout no to those who desire power and security above all else. It is the transformation of our lives that begins the change in the world. The kingdom that Jesus spoke of in those words following Peter's recognition of who he was is one that is both now and not yet. It takes root in the lives of all who listen to him, who follow him in the way of sorrows, who trust that they too will see the day of resurrection. It begins with a recognition that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And it will take a lifetime of transformation. We shed the thoughts and patterns of a world that bows down to other gods only slowly. We believe and hold fast to a hope that one day this world will be different. It will be a world where no child goes hungry, where no father buries his son who fell in war, and no mother buries her daughter who died at the hands of her abuser. It will be a world where natural enemies romp and play like puppies under the watchful eye of a toddler. This upside-down world starts with just a single command. Be transformed. Become the little Christ you claim to be every time you call yourself Christian. Give up the wealth you thought you could make and that you thought would make yourself safe. Surrender power and embrace weakness. Recognize that even your best thoughts are foolish in the sight of God. None of those things can save you. Death of the body and death of the soul come to all people. But there is a way of life, a giving up of the self, of all that you thought you wanted or needed, that will lead to life beyond death. Then whether life is good or bad, you will be able to say with the psalmist, "We have escaped like a bird from the hunter's trap. The trap is broken and we are free. Our help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth." Amen. Today we are asked to pray for Christine Trujillo, Ken Rinker, who had a fall and was in the hospital for a while last week, Chuck Osborne, who is, at least the last I heard, still waiting for some tests, for Jane Kramer's brother Kent, for Tom and Jesse Kramer, who have had a variety of health concerns this summer, for Emily Nelson. Continue to keep Elaine Dupree in prayer as she continues to go through treatment. Keep Larry Cook in prayer. I'm also going to lift up Dorothy Ann Hazelbaker right now. Keep, also, if you don't mind, my Aunt Pat in prayer. She had a massive heart attack on Tuesday, and she's doing better, but her heart is in bad shape at the moment. They think, though, that she is going to make a mostly full recovery at this point. So we have good news and bad. Also keep all the residents of Hawaii